Veterans of the Normandy campaign, you deserve your nation's thanks. May we, your fellow countrymen, be worthy of what you did for us. Reconciliation is the peaceful end to conflict, and we were reminded of this in August, when countries on both sides of the First World War came together to remember in peace. The ceramic poppies at the Tower of London drew millions, and the only possible reaction to seeing them and walking among them was silence. No one who fought in that war is still alive, but we remember their sacrifice, and indeed the sacrifice of all those in the armed forces who serve and protect us today. Many people laid down their lives in that terrible conflict. They fought so we could live in peace, at home and abroad. They died so we could live as free people in a world of free nations. They risked all so our families and neighbourhoods could be safe. We should and will remember them. Earlier this year in the South Atlantic, the Royal Navy and the Merchant Navy enabled our sailors, soldiers and airmen to go to the rescue of the Falkland Islanders, 8,000 miles across the ocean, and to reveal the professional skills and courage that could be called on in defence of basic freedoms. As a nation, we are rightly proud of our armed forces. That pride has been fully justified by their conduct in the Gulf War so far. As they, with our allies, face a fresh and yet sterner challenge, I hope that we can unite and pray that their success will be as swift as it is certain, and that it may be achieved with a smaller cost in human life and suffering as possible. Then may the true reward of their courage be granted, a just and lasting peace. Immense dignity in the face of great personal loss. That huge numbers of you have paid my mother in the last few days has been overwhelming. I have drawn great comfort. Some of you will know only too well from your own experience the grief that follows the death of a much-loved mother or sister. Mine were very much part of my life and always gave me their support and encouragement. But my own sadness was tempered by the generous tributes that so many of you have paid to the service they gave to this country and the wider Commonwealth. Although it's a time of great happiness and good cheer for many, Christmas can be hard for those who have lost loved ones. This year especially, I understand why. But for me, in the months since the death of my beloved Philip, I have drawn great comfort from the warmth and affection of the many tributes to his life and work, from around the country, the Commonwealth, and the world.
People. Often she spoke loudest through her actions, being there at both good times and bad. But as her time as monarch drew to a close, the life we all knew was halted by the pandemic. With nowhere to go, she found the words, "One more time."
I am speaking to you at what I know is an increasingly challenging time. A time of disruption in the life of our country. A disruption that has brought grief to some, financial difficulties to many, and enormous changes to the daily lives of us all. I want to thank everyone on the NHS frontline, as well as care workers and those carrying out essential roles, who selflessly continue their day-to-day duties outside the home in support of us all. We should take comfort that while we may have more still to endure, better days will return. We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. We will meet again.
She was a good dog handler. But it was like the dogs. The dogs didn't know she was the Queen, did they? But they loved her.
This is the story of Elizabeth, of our Queen and her country. Elizabeth Windsor was born in the heart of London in April 1926, spending most of her early years in England's capital. But the young princess would grow up a country girl at heart, often escaping with her family to their rural homes across the United Kingdom. Sandringham House in Norfolk, just over 100 miles from London, was a favourite destination for the young Elizabeth.
The Queen's love affair with Sandringham began with her grandfather. George V had been a very strict father, but he was an incredibly indulgent grandfather. He adored Elizabeth, he took her everywhere with him, and that was really the beginning of her love for Sandringham. For her, that was the perfect place where you could be quite near London, but still in the countryside.
Passed down as a royal residence through 4 generations of British. Lady Anne Glenconner grew up on the neighbouring country estate and became a childhood friend of the then Princess Elizabeth. She would go on to become one of her maids of honour at Elizabeth's coronation in 1953. But 2 decades earlier, the two girls would play together on this beach, developing a love for this stretch of Norfolk coastline and countryside that would last a lifetime.
My family have always had a great deal to do with the royal family. My father was equerry to the Duke of York before he became king, and because of that, my sister Carrie and I saw quite a bit of the Queen, Princess Margaret. We used to go to their birthday parties, and we also came down to this beach. This is Holcombe Beach, which I always consider the most beautiful beach in the British Isles. It's very isolated. I mean, it's like an island, North Norfolk. You can't go through it. So that cuts down the number of people who come here. And the beach is immense.
It was here at Holcombe that the young princesses, Elizabeth and Margaret, spent some of their happiest days.
None of these sand dunes were here when I was a child, and the sea came right up to the point over there, and we had our own hut, and all our nannies brought us down, picnics, and I remember the Queen and Princess Margaret coming down, and it was really exciting, and whatever the weather. And then we ran in our bathing dresses, and the sea was always miles out too, and we had to go over all these sand ridges, which I remember hurt our feet, and rubber caps, which are agony when you took them off when one's hair was wet.
The Queen's connection to this stretch of the Norfolk coastline would remain throughout her life, becoming a place she could enjoy in the company of her young family.
She came with Prince Charles and Princess Anne, and there's some lovely photographs of her, and I think she used to bury them up to their necks. I remember Prince Charles saying that he and Princess Anne had such a lovely time here. He said he had the happiest memories of Holcombe Beach. It was extremely isolated. They could relax, they could be sort of ordinary, you can't hardly call them ordinary, but they could have this ordinary family time up here. And that's what they certainly did on the beach. But the summer, I think, was made by Holcombe Beach. I know they always look forward to coming up here.
The Sandringham estate was transformed during the Queen's reign, evolving to become a thriving agricultural industry for the local community.
It was where the Queen would repair to after Christmas every year for New Year and stay there until after the anniversary of her accession in February. They love going there. It's a very special building. It's kind of secluded, although there are parts that are very much open and open to prying eyes, particularly long lenses. But given all that, it has provided a safe haven for every member of the royal family.
Over time, the Queen would become an integral part of that local rural community, regularly attending Mass at Sandringham Church. Graham and Yvonne Brown moved to Sandringham Village in 1973 when Graham became the local police officer. Here they raised their 3 boys, just a stone's throw from the estate.
It's a very nice community. You feel sometimes as if you're in a little bit of a bubble, and the outside world doesn't exist. It's very much countrified. When we first moved here, literally everybody worked for the Queen in one form or another.
The estate and the workers were her extended family. That's the thing that the Queen liked about Sandringham and Norfolk. That she could have come here and see the same faces, the same people, and be relaxed.
As the years passed, this close-knit community of the royal and the rural would share in everyday celebrations of life.
Well, our eldest son was born in November 1977, and so I said to my husband, just go and see the vicar and see when we can have Clive christened. Anyway, he came back from a meeting with the vicar and he said, the Reverend Glendonning thinks that we should have Clive christened at morning service. And I said, but doesn't the Queen go to morning service? He said, yes, but he'll clear it with the Queen first.
And then he decided he was going to do it at 11 o'clock on the second Sunday in January when all the royal family were here, and there was 26 members of the current family there.
There certainly are not many people that can say they've had the Queen at a christening of their own child. No, but we're very, very fortunate in lots of ways. When we came out, I think every newspaper and TV station was there, and it was quite a hectic time, and it was very foggy. My poor little baby was crying because he wanted his lunch. But it was really, really nice.
Yvonne's relationship with the Queen continued and developed over the years, as both were long-time members of the Sandringham Women's Institute, of which the Queen was the honorary president. Founded in 1915, the Women's Institute was set up to encourage country women to be involved in the growing and preserving of food, to help with shortages during the First World War.
The Queen actually became a member in 1943. She was our longest serving member. The Queen attended the January meeting of the Sandringham WI, and it's been that way ever since I can remember.
A guest speaker would often prove one of the highlights of the WI's New Year get-together.
I was asked to talk to the Sandringham WI annual general meeting on January. So my wife and I polled along to Norfolk into a village hall with the 25 members of the Sandringham WI. And then the Queen came in and we all sang the national anthem. And that was slightly surreal because she's sort of standing 10 feet away. And then I stood up to do my little talk. And I was aware that I was here, the trestle tables, and the Queen's face was there. And I said, we're awfully close now, aren't we? And she took hold of the edge of the table. She said, yes, she said, you pull, I'll push. There was nothing more pleasurable in life than making the Queen laugh, telling a funny story. And she didn't just go, she threw back her head and laughed. And said, oh, I'm fine here, this is okay.
A warm welcome for the UK's most famous woman from members of the most famous women's organisation.
In 2015, 72 years after the Queen first joined the ranks of the WI, the Institute celebrated its 100th anniversary.
We were very honoured and privileged to be given a seat in the Royal Box at the WI Centenary meeting, along with 2 other WIs. It was really lovely, and then, of course, we were in the foyer when the Queen was trying to cut the cake. The Countess of Wessex and the Princess Royal were talking to the ladies behind, and the Queen was trying to put the knife in the cake, and she sort of kept looking from one to the other. So in the end, the Princess Royal picked it up and put the knife in. So yeah, it was quite amusing. To be fair to the ladies who baked the cake, it was the icing that was hard.
Although the Queen was clearly at home in the countryside and with village life, it was perhaps when she was surrounded by her animals that she was at her most content.
It didn't matter whether it was Balmoral or Sandringham, she was at her happiest. There were always the wags who say, well, the Queen is a country woman at heart. She likes horses, she likes dogs, and she likes people, not necessarily in that order. But horses and dogs came pretty near the top.
Sandringham was also home to one of the Queen's greatest passions, her dogs. It was a love affair that began as a young girl and one that would last a lifetime.
She first received a corgi in 1933. That was Dookie, that was bought by the Duke for the family. But Susan was the princess's favourite corgi. She received her on her 18th birthday, and she was her corgi, not a family corgi.
The Queen's love of corgis would become well documented, but perhaps less well known was her equal devotion to her gun dogs.
She enjoys this, isn't it?
In 1964, Bill Meldrum took charge of the Sandringham Kennels, breeding and training the Queen's dogs in a career that would span over 40 years.
She was a country woman, and she liked the company of ordinary people who would speak their minds. Not argue with them, but speak their minds. She could have a discussion with them. And they didn't tell her what she wanted, what they thought she wanted to hear. They told her what was happening round about.
Bill was just 25 and newly married to wife Annie, but already a renowned gun dog man when he first met the Queen.
He came into a spectator actually once. I had just won the British Championship the year before, and she did speak to me and ask me how I trained my dog. And the Queen's ambition was to own a field trial champion. She said, would you like to come and work for me? And I said no. We lived in a lovely little cottage in Scotland. It was nice and comfortable. We worked for a lovely family. Queen, they were pretty persistent that we came. You know. I said to her, we'll give it 4 years. When I went for my 20-year medal into the room where the Queen was standing, and she had a big smile on her face, and she said, not bad for someone who only came for 4 years. She says, I knew the day that you come, you would stay.
Bill and the Queen formed a successful partnership together, training competition gun dogs.
She was a good dog handler, very good. But it was like the dogs. The dogs didn't know she was the Queen, did they? But they loved her.
Alongside Bill, the Queen took part in many gun dog trials, competing with other handlers from across the United Kingdom. And after one successful event, this most royal of competitors overheard 2 fellow handlers discussing her performance.
And these 2 handlers, who were amongst the best 10 in the country at that time, and one of them said, there is no doubt who's won today. We haven't had a look in. The Queen's miles ahead of us. And when they went away, she come to me and she told me about it. She said, you've no idea how good that made me feel, because nobody was favouring her. These people acknowledged that she had her dog had done well that day. And in her prime, she could go with the best.
130 miles south of Sandringham, Windsor Castle was the Queen's weekend and Easter retreat. It was here that Elizabeth's other great passion began, her lifelong love of horses.
The Queen absolutely loved Windsor. Her father was given the lodge at Windsor when she was just a little girl, just about 5 years old. And that was a place where the family could go to be away from London. And for the Queen, when she was a little girl, that was absolutely marvellous because that was where she learned how to ride. And she absolutely adored her riding lessons. And until her father became king in 1936, Elizabeth wanted to live in the country with lots of horses and dogs, to enjoy herself in the country, to look after the estate. That's what she really hoped for, because at heart, really unlike her parents, she was a country girl. As Queen, she particularly treasured Windsor because she could be there very quickly from London, she could be there from Buckingham Palace, be there very fast, and be on a horse within a couple of hours from London.
She was a countrywoman. She rode out most mornings, except in her latter years when it was too cold in winter, because she said it made her eyes water, and that's the only reason she stopped doing it. And she never wore a hard hat. And I remember saying to Terry Pendry, her groom, she always rides out in a headscarf, you know, and people get very worried. And Terry said, you going to tell her?
One man who shared the Queen's passion for riding and horses was Ian Balding, who spent 4 decades training racehorses for the royal family.
And I can remember writing to her one time because I'd read in the paper that she'd given up riding, and I knew how it would upset her. So I wrote to her and said, I'm so sorry, ma'am, you've had to give up riding, and I feel for you, sort of thing. Anyway, I had a letter back, literally by return, saying I have not given up riding. So I was delighted about that.
And it was on these picturesque downs in Hampshire that Ian would train the Queen's racehorses.
We are now on Watership Down, which is one of the most beautiful places in England, I think. And we have lots of bunny rabbits, as you can imagine. But the most beautiful gallops in England, I think. And the Queen knew horses better than I did. She was such a lovely owner to deal with. I'd say she was more understanding than most owners because she was more knowledgeable. She loved horses all her life, and she was as good a horsewoman as I know, and she adored them. She's just like any of the rest of us who love horses.
Said to be the first engagement that went into the Queen's diary each year, at Royal Ascot, the Queen would lead the royal procession through Great Windsor Park to the racecourse, a place where sometimes the Royal Guard could slip as the thrill of the race took hold.
It's lovely, especially if you happen to have a winner for her. It's you saw her, she had a winner at Royal Ascot, and you could see the sort of pleasure and excitement. I couldn't begin to tell you how important she's been to the racing world. I mean, she just makes the whole difference to English racing, I think. It's an enormous privilege to be one of her trainers. I just think it's remarkable. We were a lucky nation, and I think we know it.
All her life, the Queen was comfortable around horses, but as a young woman, she also mastered the complicated art of riding side saddle.
The Queen's been very important in putting side saddle out there. She was so elegant, her poise, and how well the horses were trained was always something to aspire to. So yes, she was amazing side saddle, really.
It's a tradition that can be traced back to the 14th century. introduced for practicality due to women's long heavy skirts and to preserve a lady's modesty.
The idea is to sit totally straight. People think you sit sideways and twist. In fact, your seat bones are completely level on this saddle, and it is an art in that you have to keep your weight and your shoulder to the right. To ride well, you have to have an understanding of how a horse goes and how to ride a horse, and to be sympathetic and harmonious with the horse.
The Queen's skills as a horsewoman could be seen in public during the annual Trooping the Colour Parade, an impressive display of pageantry held on the Queen's official birthday. Elizabeth often rode her favourite horse, Burmese, each year training for the event under the watchful eye of Sylvia Stanier.
The Queen used to ride every day that she could to get the muscles of herself sorted out and ready, and to get to know her horse and how she was feeling. Burmese herself was a character. Burmese had most wonderful memory. She had been trained originally in Canada by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police to be the head of their musical ride.
The Queen's relationship with Burmese and her skills riding side saddle were never more evident than during one eventful parade that would make headlines across the world.
There was an episode in 1981 which, in some senses, encapsulated everything about her life and horses. It was a duty day. It was Trooping the Colour. Hugely important, and to Her Majesty. She was in full dress uniform, side saddle on Burmese. It's all ceremonial until an ex-cadet, a former cadet, in the crowd, pulls a pistol and fires 6 shots. She gathers it up, she rides on, the colour is duly trooped. That is a queen about her duty and a horsewoman about her duty. Truly remarkable episode.
That showed her level of skill, balance and harmony with the horse, that she went with the horse and stayed completely still and straight in the saddle. And there is no doubt the Queen was a very skilled, accomplished rider.
5 years after this event, the Queen stopped riding side saddle in the parade at the age of 60, following the retirement of Burmese.
The Queen is a very fine horsewoman astride or side saddle. She had a great feel for it, and as you know, she's a great feel for the animals. And she made a friendship between herself and Burmese. Burmese most certainly knew the Queen knew Burmese.
Queen Elizabeth shared her passion for country life with her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. Theirs was a love story that had a lifelong connection to the Hampshire countryside and to the Broadlands estate. It was nearby at Romsey Abbey in 1946 that the 20-year-old Princess Elizabeth, alongside sister Margaret, was bridesmaid at the wedding of Patricia Mountbatten, cousin of Prince Philip of Greece.
And when they arrived in the porch, Prince Philip was waiting for them to escort them in. And there's this great moment that was captured by all the photographers in which Princess Elizabeth took off her fur coat and gave it to Prince Philip. You can absolutely see they are a couple in love. They're completely in love. So really, this moment between Princess Elizabeth, the bridesmaid, and Prince Philip announced to the whole world that these two were determined to get married.
Their wedding would take place just a year later, with the ceremony broadcast to an audience of 200 million people across the world. Later that day, the newlyweds escaped to the privacy of the Hampshire estate of Broadlands.
So what's very fitting is that the Queen goes on honeymoon to the home of Philip's uncle, Earl Mountbatten. Elizabeth was so fond of the countryside. The countryside around Broadlands was absolutely beautiful and a place where they hoped they'd get some seclusion and some chance to enjoy the nature. And there's this really wonderful pathé footage of Prince Philip and Princess Elizabeth walking around the estate with her favourite corgi, Susan. And there's a really beautiful moment where the couple sit down on a bench and they look at the photos from their wedding, and you can really see the happiness in Princess Elizabeth's face. She's so happy. She's completely overjoyed. She's radiant. We're looking at a young couple in love, starting their life together, looking like any other young couple on honeymoon. The difference is that one day she'll be queen and one day he will be her consort.
The Queen and Philip's love affair with this part of Hampshire continued throughout their marriage, with regular visits to the Broadlands estate.
They pretty much came here every year, and they came with the Silver Jubilee. And what was really wonderful was on their 60th wedding anniversary, the Queen and Prince Philip came to Broadlands and they repeated those iconic photographs they had taken in their 1947 honeymoon. So many years later, the photos were taken again. What you saw was the same affection, the same bond, and to them, Broadlands always had a special place in their hearts.
And no royal visit to the area would be complete unless the Queen and Prince Philip called in to Romsey Abbey, the scene of their first public engagement. 70 years after they were first photographed together here, the royal couple were back for another family wedding.
I think my favourite memories of the Queen being here are of when she arrived at the wedding in 2016. That sense of, I know this place. It's a place where I feel absolutely comfortable. And you could tell when she walked in and we led her in that there was a sense of, oh, it's nice to be at home almost. So I think that's the biggest thing I'd take away from it, and that she was part of a family occasion in a family place which has held so many deep memories for her over the whole of her life. I think the Queen's faith has been extraordinary. I think it's been actually at the centre of everything she's done. At every Christmas Day broadcast, she has spoken about her faith. She has been the best evangelist that the Church of England has had. She was Defender of the Faith, and I think she's taken that title really seriously. And for her, being Queen has been a vocation.
And each summer, the royal family would take a holiday exploring the Western Isles of Scotland on board the royal yacht Britannia. It was 1953 when the Queen launched the vessel that would sail the world's oceans for nearly half a century.
I name this ship Britannia. I wish success to her and to all who sail in
her. With a dedicated crew of 220 yachtsmen and 20 officers, the royal yacht sailed more than 1 million miles around the world, visiting over 600 ports in 135 countries. Britannia played an important diplomatic and trade role, hosting presidents and other dignitaries as she sailed the world.
Royal Yacht Britannia was unique. It was a Royal Navy ship. It was a ship that was built not just to move the royal family around various parts of the world, but it was a very good selling tool for UK PLC.
But it was a yacht the Queen could also call home, a floating royal residence she once described as the one place she could truly relax, and a vessel in which she could explore some of her favourite parts of her United Kingdom.
The yacht was used invariably at the end of July to take the royal family on what they call the Western Isles cruise. So they'd take them around the west coast of the United Kingdom, drop them off at the top of Scotland, and they'd go down to Balmoral.